This is your profanity warning. Your warning that bad words are about to be said in the following podcast. If there are children in the room, in the house, or indeed within a 5-mile radius, please send them away. This podcast is not for us. Is that good?
Yeah, it was great. That was perfect.
Okay, good.
Bill's gonna kill me.
Hiya, Georgie. What a nice boat. Do you want it back?
Yes, please.
You look like a nice boy. I bet you have a lot of friends.
3, but my brother's my best S.
Where's he?
In bed, sick.
I bet I could cheer him up. I'll give him a balloon. Do you want a balloon too, Georgie?
I'm not supposed to take stuff from strangers.
Oh, well, I'm Pennywise, the dancing clown. Pennywise? Yes, meet Georgie. Georgie, meet Pennywise. Now we aren't strangers, are we?
Coming to you live from the recent past in gleefully horrific New York City. Welcome to 21 Jump Scare. I'm Bradford Lorick.
And I'm Eric Winnick.
21 Jump Scare is a podcast about horror films told from several points of view.
We call this podcast 21 Jump Scare because, at least for now, our plan is to only produce 21 of them.
But also because, as in a certain TV series from the late 80s, one of us is going back to school, as it were, to learn something new. And this neophyte will be experiencing a horror film he hasn't seen yet.
Indeed. So each week, we will bring you a film from the perspective of someone rewatching it and from the point of view of someone, usually me, experiencing it for the first time.
Exclusively you. Experiencing it for the first time. So let's turn to this week's film, 2017's It.
1988, Derry, Maine. A young boy, Georgie Denbrough, runs along a rainy street, chasing his homemade paper sailboat until it slips into a storm drain. Fortunately, the boat doesn't disappear. Unfortunately, it is caught by Pennywise, the dancing clown, who beckons Georgie to reach for his boat. Georgie does, and Pennywise pulls the screaming boy down into the sewer. Fade to black. 1 year later, Georgie's stuttering older brother Bill hasn't given up hope that Georgie may still be alive, out there, somewhere. Along with his friends, a group of amiable misfits that call themselves the Losers Club, Bill sets out to investigate the mysterious forces that have been causing people to disappear for years at an alarming rate from Derry. Battling menacing bullies, antagonistic and abusive parents, haunted houses, and an endless series of slamming doors, the losers press on, forced to stare down their darkest fears. Okay, sir, who's in this film?
It features a constellation of young stars, many of whom were not household names in 2017, and still are not household names, although Finn Wolfhard was established at that point as one of the stars of Stranger Things.
It is worth naming all of these kids, though, because they are uniformly excellent, especially our main character, Bill, played by Jaeden Martell, who went on to play Jacob Thromby in Knives Out.
We also have Jeremy Ray Taylor as the oft-bullied research king, Ben Hanscom. Chosen Jacobs is Mike Hanlon. The aforementioned Finn Wolfhard as Richie.
There's also Jack Dylan Grazer as Eddie. Sophia Lillis as Beverly, a girl struggling with impending womanhood, who's also in the midst of a heavily implied incestuous situation at home. and Wyatt Oleff as Stanley, a rabbi's son who can't seem to focus on his bar mitzvah studies.
And of course, there's Bill Skarsgard as the villain, the evil clown Pennywise. He, of course, is from the royal family of Swedish acting. His dad is Stellan Skarsgard of Lars von Trier fame, and his brother is Alexander Skarsgard from True Blood. So the director of It is Andy Muschietti, an Argentinian director whose first film was 2013's Mama.
Did you see that?
I did see that. Did you see that?
No, I have. Why would I have seen it? Was it any good?
It's pretty good. It's okay. I mean, it looks great. It's got an excellent cast. Not my favorite movie, but I would watch that again.
Muschietti, following this film, went on to direct the sequel, It Chapter 2, and he is slated to direct The Flash for DC. Good for him. Good for Andy.
And the screenplay, of course, is adapted from the first part of the novel by Stephen King, whom some of you may have heard of.
Is he like an underground guy? I don't know.
Yeah, he's due to really blow up anytime soon, I think. Fingers crossed. Second place. But the script went through several incarnations, including an original draft by Chase Palmer and Cary Fukunaga. And you may or may not know this, but Fukunaga was actually attached to direct the project, but dropped out due to creative differences, quote unquote. Right. At which point, Gary Dauberman rewrote the script when Muschietti came on to direct. Dauberman would go on to write It Chapter 2 as well, and is slated to direct another Stephen King big screen adaptation, Salem's Lot.
Like Salem's Lot, this was the second adaptation of the Stephen King novel It, following a made-for-TV miniseries in 1990 that adapted both parts of the novel and had the characters as both kids and adults, and starred the most 1990 cast of all time: Tim Curry as Pennywise, Seth Green, Harry Anderson, John Ritter, Richard Mazur, Tim Reed, Richard Thomas, and Annette O'Toole.
Hi, Georgie. Aren't you going to say hello? Oh, come on, bucko. Don't you want a balloon?
I'm not supposed to take stuff from strangers. My dad said so.
Very wise of your dad, Georgie. Very wise indeed. I, Georgie, am Pennywise the Dancing Clown. You are Georgie. So now we know each other. Correct?
I guess so. I gotta go.
Go? Without this?
How'd this film do?
It, and I mean It, was a huge success. I mean, this film was made for $35 million, took in a whopping $123 million on opening weekend in September 2017. It grossed around $329 million in the US and took in just over $700 million worldwide, which makes it the most successful horror film of all time. Although it looks like critical reception was mixed.
You know, it was, sir. The film currently has a 69 on Metacritic and an 84 on Rotten Tomatoes. In the New York Times, in his review, A.O. Scott said the movie was a skillful blend of nostalgic sentiment and hair-raising effects with the visual punch of big-screen digital hocus pocus and the liberties of an R rating.
Andrew Barker from Variety, he was less impressed. He said, as spine-tingling as a number of individual scenes are, the film struggles to find a proper rhythm. Scene-to-scene transitions are static and disjointed. Curiously, it grows less intense as it goes. And I'm going to spoil something for you right here, Bradford, and tell you I disagree with Andrew.
Oh, all right.
All right.
Well, you know, ultimately, when award season rolled around, the film was sadly snubbed by the Golden Globes and the Oscars. Ugh. But gladly, it did pick up Best On-Screen Team at the MTV Movie Awards.
Talk about the awards that we're going to give later, for people who most deserve to die. How about the movie critics that didn't like this film?
How about Andrew Barker?
Andrew Barker,
Shove that son of a bitch in a sewer grate with
That's
a
right.
menacing psychotic clown. Let's
Andrew
see
Barker,
how he makes it.
You win the John Doe Award.
Where you going, Ed? If you lived here, you'd be home by now. Come join the clown, Ed. You'll float down here. We'll float down here. Yes, we do.
So how did you first hear about this film and where did you see it?
Well, it was a pretty underground title. Not a lot of people were talking about it. Just kidding. It was everywhere. It was a huge sensation. And, of course, I have a great fondness for both the original Stephen King book, which I read when I was 14 years old, and the 1990 ABC miniseries, which I was glued to every night that it was on, which happened to come out just as I finished reading the book. So, all of that is to say that, it was hyped to the nth degree, as I think it should have been. And I saw it with a handful of very close friends at Battery Park.
Now, the one thing I did not understand before watching this film is that the book actually takes place in both eras, correct? The book takes place when the characters are children, and then we meet them later, which is what chapter 2, the film chapter 2 is. Is that correct?
That is correct, though the original story is set between the 50s and the 80s.
Right.
Whereas this adaptation, to bring it into a more sort of contemporary vein, is set in the 80s in the sort of first act where we learn the story of the kids. And then chapter 2 is set in the late 20-teens.
So tell me, why did you choose this film for me to see as part of your curriculum?
Because I thought it would scare the pants off of you. I think it's a pretty exceptionally well-made film. I think the source material is not the easiest to adapt, and I think that the filmmakers did an excellent job on the adaptation and the translation of this story. And also because of all of those bona fides that we've already kind of talked about. It felt like it deserved to be a part of your education.
We want to issue a full spoiler alert. We will be spoiling this film completely and utterly. If you have not seen this film and plan to, please watch the film, then come back and listen to the episode.
Okay, you're seeing the film for the first time. Of course, you're watching it in the comfort of your home on a television, as opposed to experiencing the shared cathartic, traumatic experience with a crowd full of strangers in the dark. What did you think of the film, sir?
I straight up loved this film. I found it to be enormously entertaining. There are so many gorgeous images in this film. The outdoor shots, Derry in the woods. Mm-hmm. It's just meant to be idyllic, kind of like Lumberton in Blue Velvet, but there's all this rot beneath the surface. The image,
which is quite frankly, a central metaphor for the story.
Yeah. The image of Stanley with the sun streaming through that gorgeous Star of David stained glass window over his shoulder.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And then, even more eerie is the image of the floating kids in the cistern at the end, which finally explains that line we keep hearing, we all float down here.
We all float, Georgie. And when you're down here with us, you'll float too.
I want to go through some of the set pieces and then we can sort of make that sort of subtle turn. But I want to say that even the questions that I have about this film, the slight concerns, were not enough to get in my way of enjoying it thoroughly.
I'm glad to hear that.
The scenes that I bring up are ones that you will probably agree with. So let's talk about some set pieces in this that really are stunning.
Yeah, let's talk about our favorite scenes.
That first moment, I mean, it really, really gets you from the beginning, because that first moment where you see Pennywise in the storm drain, you had read the book and you had seen the miniseries, and I know that that moment is in this miniseries, but do you think it was handled differently or more effectively this time around?
I mean, look, the limitations of a made-for-television miniseries are many, and when you're translating a spectacular horror story to the small screen, I mean, I think the sort of beauty that you're kind of describing, right? I mean, and it is a horrible beauty about this film. I mean, the miniseries doesn't quite have the same visual impact. And all of that being said, as I mentioned earlier, I read the book when I was 14 years old, which is not too far afield of the ages of the group of the principal young characters, the Losers Club. And in this screen adaptation, the time period in which it exists happens to be not too far afield of the time period in which I read it. And, as I may live in a gorgeous Park Avenue apartment, but I grew up in a small town, which felt much like the world of Derry, Maine. Tim Curry's performance is pretty indelible. He does an extraordinary job playing Pennywise. He's truly scary. Also, I will say that at the same time that I was experiencing the story, my kid brother was probably about Georgie's age as I was about Bill's age. So, that scene was always particularly impactful for me. I would think, what would I do in that situation? And it was really truly horrifying for me. So I think the scene in the storm drain is, I mean, as you said, it really kind of sets the tone for what you're about to experience in the rest of the film. It's brutal, it's fast, it's bloody, it's violent, and so is the movie as a whole.
Gotcha. I'm going to go sort of in order of my favorite scenes leading up to my favorite. So the garage scene where they're sort of laying out their plan and looking at how the sewer system sort of matches up with town landmarks. And someone, I think it's Stanley, gets upset and tears the map off the wall, which just leaves the slide that's up. And suddenly the slide carousel kind of roars to life and starts, going through pictures of the Denbrough family.
Turn it off! Turn it off! Yeah, turn it off! Turn it off!
Images on screen, as opposed to becoming a different photograph from a different moment, a different location, each one kind of moves like a frame in a sequence, right? It's like watching an animation. It's like flipping through a flip book. The scene starts to change, it starts to morph, and Bill and Georgie's mother, her hair whipping in the wind, becomes Pennywise. And it represents a pretty significant moment, not only in the film, but also in the film's production. Because this scene was the first time any of the members of the young cast had seen Bill Skarsgard in his terrifying Pennywise getup. And their reactions, the fear that you're seeing on the faces of the actors, is genuine, because they'd been kept away from Bill in his costume and makeup and wig until this particular moment. And I think it's a pretty genius move on the part of director Muschietti to have presented it in that way.
Or it's just incredibly mean. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it worked, right?
Oh,
it
yeah.
really works.
So that's a fantastic set piece. Two more, the haunted house scenes. This sort of classic haunted house on the edge of town, where
The house on Niebolt Street.
Niebolt Street, that's right. Where
Mhm.
so Richie, Eddie, and Bill head into various rooms in the house to try and find out what's going on. And I think they initially see one of the kids who's disappeared, a girl.
Betty Ripson.
Betty Ripson, that's right. At one point, they're confronted with 3 doors marked in blood. Scary, very scary, and not scary at all. And they wind up confronting Pennywise in 2 different spots. Richie, who, as it turns out, is terrified of clowns, has an experience where he goes into a room which is full of clown dolls and mannequins.
He's what we might call a coulrophobic.
He is.
He's afraid of clowns.
He experiences what psychotherapists would refer to as flooding. So Eddie, in the meantime, falls through the floor at one point. He breaks his arm in a
lands in the abandoned kitchen downstairs.
Horrible way, because you could clearly see his arms pointing the wrong way. And then he's attacked.
Pennywise unfurls himself.
He does.
from inside an old icebox.
Inside a refrigerator, only to be smacked in the head by Beverly. Those scenes are they're just a masterclass in tension. And there's so many doors that just slam behind them. And,
And I mean, and we're talking about great use of sound design, of rhythm, of editing, and I think what's also very interesting about this scene is that, these kids have found strength among themselves, right? They're sort of outcasts and they come together, and together they are stronger than when they are separate. And Pennywise needs to separate them to really make them afraid. And in this scene, as you were kind of describing, there are ways in which they all kind of get sidetracked from each other and separated so that Pennywise can have an easier time of picking them off.
Come on, ready? No! Where's Eddie? Eddie! Eddie!
This isn't real enough for you, Billy. I'm not real enough for you.
Holy shit.
It wasn't real enough for Georgie.
The final scene that I want to talk about is my absolute favorite in the film, and I just think it's just genius. And I really think the standout scene in this film.
Tell me why.
Well, Beverly hears the sounds of kids emanating from her sink. There's a great POV shot looking up from the drain where you see her looking in. She then grabs a tape measure, which she lowers down into the drain, and it just keeps going, and it goes and goes and goes. And there's a moment where it seems like she's not going to be able to get it back up, but when she does pull it back up, not only has it been snapped off, it's got like blood and hair on it, and something has clearly gotten to it. But it's the moment after that where I can't even describe it. It's almost like hair comes up from the sink and wraps around her head and starts pulling her in. And that's scary enough. Then what happens next is almost like it felt like an homage to Nightmare on Elm Street, because this geyser comes gushing up through the drain in the sink, hits her in the face, and then just paints the entire bathroom red, just
there
everywhere.
Is not a square inch of clean surface in the bathroom. Everything is covered with dripping gore.
It is just a masterful scene. And the kicker, of course, is when her father then walks into the room and he seemingly
And sees
he can't see
none of it.
any of it. And of course, the losers who come in, I believe, the next day see all of it. Talk to me about your feelings about this scene.
This scene is in every it. It's in the it. Let me tell you. Were you in the it? I was in the it. The scene is a pretty pivotal scene in all of the in the source material and the two adaptations, and what it says about the willing blindness of adults to understand what the children are experiencing is pretty powerful. And, I think it's a pretty psychologically important moment, not only for that reason, but also because cleaning the bathroom becomes this sort of act of bonding for these kids who are already very tight, but it indicates that they can all experience the same thing. They're all seeing it. It's real for all of them.
I also think there's something very important about the scene because we've seen Beverly cut her hair earlier in the film in an act of what seems to be rebellion against her father, who is supremely creepy and is clearly abusing her. And she just sort of does a number on her hair. And at some point earlier, we also see her buying tampons in a drugstore. Beverly she's clearly on the verge of womanhood.
Yes.
It
speaks to menstruation. It speaks to puberty, maturation.
And so when you talk about fears and the concept of what you see in this film is what you fear the most, what you see in that scene are Beverly's fears coming to life.
I would also
would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with much of that. For me, her impetus to cut her hair is to make herself less sexually attractive to her father. It's probably worth noting that that Beverly's mother is dead. That Beverly's father blames Beverly for her mother's death. And as she becomes more of a woman who resembles her dead mother, we have moments in this film where her father sprays Beverly with her mother's perfume. It's a very intense and like deeply messed up interaction between the two of them. And she escapes to the bathroom and cuts off her hair. It's not an insignificant moment in the story. So a scene that we haven't really talked about is the scene in the library where Ben Hanscom, who's new to Derry, he's researching all of the sort of sordid and terrifying history of the town. And this is kind of where he and the Losers Club, and we, the uninitiated in the audience, learn that that there is a 27-year cycle of something that happens in Derry. And there isn't a name at this point, I think, that they can put on this series of circumstances, but there's always some inciting event where a great number of people are killed or harmed, and there is an outrageous number, a disproportionate number of children who go missing. And in that scene, as Ben is, leafing through some periodicals and some history books about Derry, we see, and this moment may have been a little bit lost on you on a television, where the librarian in the back becomes a very threatening figure. And Ben is reading about an explosion at the Derry Ironworks. Is that correct? It's the Ironworks during an Easter egg hunt that killed, dozens and dozens of people, and a red balloon, which is, the calling card of the Pennywise form of it, kind of leads him down the stairs into the stacks. And as he's downstairs, a headless boy who he'd seen in the photograph of the, aftermath of the Derry Ironworks explosion starts to sort of haltingly and sightlessly walk down the stairs toward Ben, and that becomes Pennywise the clown. I love the subtle horror of that scene. I think it's extremely well done. It may lose some of its power without seeing it on an enormous projection screen in a movie theater, but I do particularly love that moment. But then again, in any horror movie, especially a horror movie set in the 80s, I am a sucker for the microfiche scene. I love a research scene in a scary movie. There is one more scene that I want to discuss, which I might suggest is the scariest scene in the film. That's the scene in which Henry Bowers arrives back to his house, encounters a red balloon tied to the mailbox, and when he opens the mailbox, there's a package inside which contains a switchblade knife. I think it's scary enough to think about this character who is already portrayed as violent, imbalanced, unhinged, to think of this kid at this time having a switchblade knife. You fear for the Losers Club when someone like Henry Bowers, who's their sort of like physical, real world childhood bully nemesis, having a switchblade knife.
Right. Well, actually, if I may, he actually does have a switchblade earlier in the film, and he loses it after carving his initial into Ben's
stomach.
Abdomen. Yes, exactly. Right. So it's almost like somebody sent it back to him, essentially.
Right. He's got a hand on his shoulder. Right. So the switchblade. Thank you for correcting me. Mea culpa. I'm embarrassed.
Of course. Do not be.
To have reclaimed his switchblade, and he goes inside and he encounters his sort of his racist, violent, aggressive policeman father, sitting in a chair watching television. He's passed out in a chair and the television is on. Similarly to the slide carousel, right? The television seems to kind of be taken over by, there's this kind of pervasive evil that is kind of controlling the programming on television. And what we encounter is effectively a children's daytime television show, much like Romper Room or something that would have been on TV that we would know, with an audience full of kids and a effervescent grown-up female hostess encouraging Henry to kill his father. And at which point Henry plunges the switchblade into his father's neck.
Yeah.
and watches him die before he goes out to dispatch some of his friends. I think the psychological import of that scene, and specifically that moment when Henry kills his father, that is the real sort of human horror in this story.
Go!
Guys, we can't.
Sorry.
I told you, Bill. I fucking told you.
I don't want to die.
It's your fault. You punched me in the face. You made me walk through shitty water. You brought me to a fucking crackhead house. And now, I'm gonna have to kill this fucking clown. Welcome to the Losers Club, asshole!
What about it doesn't work for you?
There's very little that doesn't work for me. I have two questions, and I feel like a lot of this film makes you wonder what is real.
Mm-hmm.
What are the kids actually seeing? And that makes you wonder about the rules of the film, which I think are kind of sketchily laid out. There's the question of, does Dad really not see the blood in the bathroom? Does Pennywise lose his powers when people aren't scared of him, like Freddy? Are we supposed to believe that this evil exists, as the kids keep telling themselves it's not real, it's all a bad dream? Or is this just what they're seeing? Is this just a projection of their fears?
Well, I think in the world of the Stephen King novel, all of this is real. There is a disconnect between the adults and what they are open to experiencing and what they can experience, and what the children are experiencing. I don't believe that Beverly's father can see the blood, but I believe that the blood is real. Otherwise, is it a folie à deux? Is it a shared madness among this group of kids? I don't think so. And I think it's also kind of demonstrated because it's not limited to just these kids who are experiencing it. Everybody around them, as we said before, Betty Ripscomb, she has disappeared. Patrick Hochstetter is dispatched. All of the things that are happening are legitimately happening. The adults, of course, are aware of the fact that the children are going missing. But the methodology of it, and something that we also haven't really talked about, is that it does not only appear as Pennywise, but it can take the form of whatever someone fears the most. And fear is described, I believe, in the novel, and perhaps in this adaptation, and I may just not be remembering it, or it might be It Chapter 1 or It Chapter 2, but Pennywise describes fear as being like salt in the meat. That it's the way that fear makes the children taste is that much better. So Pennywise needs the children to both believe in him and to fear him. And if there's no belief, there's no Pennywise. But if there's no fear, the experience for Pennywise is diminished significantly.
Right. And my interpretation of Pennywise is that Pennywise is a demon. I mean, this is a film about the manifestation of evil as a being that can take the form of a clown, and most often does, but could also take the form of the painting that Stanley sees, the headless boy that Ben sees, or whatever is coming up out of the sink in Beverly's house. But ultimately, in its rawest, purest form, it is a demon of some kind. Would you agree with that?
I would not agree with that. I would suggest that it, in its rawest form, is more of a Lovecraftian adversary. It's something sort of incomprehensible. It's something enormous and powerful that can shapeshift, that can take upon itself the characteristics of the thing that you fear the most. And in the novel and in adaptations of it, the true form of it is cosmic horror. It comes from, the edge of time and space, beyond any sort of human comprehension. So I would not classify it as a demon, which would be dispatched from hell by the devil in some sort of satanic milieu. But it is bigger than that. It is older than the universe, and its true form is what's known as the deadlights. And when Beverly in the sewer, when the kids are trying to defeat it as Pennywise opens its enormous jaws with its many rows of teeth, there's kind of an orange light that pours out, and those are its deadlights. And to look into its deadlights is to have your mind erased, irrevocably, to be to sort of be put into to be made to float. And much like all the other bodies of all the other child victims of it, Beverly herself begins to sort of levitate as she's looking into the deadlights.
I was really hard pressed to come up with how to describe it. And, but I think that you've obviously gotten a lot closer than I have. You've had a little bit more time to think about this.
I've spent a little more time with
exactly.
it. But, I do think that is the authorial intent.
And the winner is... Well, the time has come.
Now let's give out some awards. This is one of my favorite parts of the podcast.
Is this the award segment?
This is the
show?
awards. These are the awards that the film did not receive.
Always a surprise when it comes around.
Leave it to MTV to recognize true genius when it sees it. But anyway, our first award is for most disturbing scene. We call this the Tom Six Award, named after the infamous director of the Human
Centipede full sequence. Yes. I got to say, I think it's probably the scene where Henry Bowers kills his dad. I find it truly disturbing. What about you?
If you're going to pick a scene for most disturbing, for me, there's nothing like blood gushing out of a drain into somebody's face, splashing all over a room, and just painting it blood red.
Well, I got to say, to echo your sentiment or to take it in another direction, when it comes to psychotic, murderous clowns, don't dream it, be it.
Be it. There you go. Our next, thank you. Speaking of Tim Curry, our next award is for most likable character.
Are you talking about the Seth Brundle Award?
I would be named after
the one that's named after Jeff Goldblum's character and David
from The
Cronenberg's The Fly.
Yes, I am talking about that. Who do you got?
I gotta say, I think I might give an award to the same character for in two categories. I think the most likable character is little Georgie Denbrough, and I mean, I think, I think it takes me back to being a big brother in the 1980s, but I really have a special place in my heart for Georgie. I think he's the most likable character. What about you? Who gets who's your fly boy?
I thought about this, and I just have to say, because his performance is so good and he's so incredibly sensitive, well observed, with his stutter and the care in his eyes and the love that he has for Beverly, I'm going to give the Seth Brundle Award to Bill Denbrough, played by Jaeden Martell.
Well done. I think that's an excellent choice. I think we should move on to the Ellen Ripley Award.
What are we giving that one for?
Well, for the character who most deserved to live but didn't.
Right.
Again, I think I want to toss that over to Georgie.
Yeah,
I mean, of course, without Georgie's death, there is no film.
Right.
Without Georgie's death, I mean, there's so much payoff for that little boy's dispatchment in the first scene.
Yeah.
But I think that other than being the motor of the film, I think he deserved to live. I mean, of course, that ends the movie right away. And we've seen parodies of that. But yeah, I think Georgie most deserved to live.
It's a tough call because to me, everyone who deserved to live in this film lived, except for Georgie. So I'm going to agree with you on that. I think the Ellen Ripley Award, named for Sigourney Weaver's character in the Alien cinematic universe.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it. Never heard of the dame. Georgie wins.
All right. I'm glad we're in agreement.
So moving on to the character who most deserved to die. We call this the John Doe Award.
Named, of course, for Kevin Spacey's character in the film Seven.
What's in the box?
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 It's Gwyneth Paltrow's head. Spoiler. Send it back by return of post to Goop, courtesy of Gwyneth Paltrow.
There you
Thank
have
you
it.
very much.
There you go. I went with a character who did die. I mean, there is, of course, some question about what happens to Pennywise at the end of this film because he slips away into darkness. But there is a character who does die and most deserves to die. And I got to give it to Henry Bowers because, first of all, despicable character. And I really found myself wanting to see the bullies get their due.
Get their comeuppance.
They don't really in this film. They don't really get their comeuppance from Pennywise in the way like that the Losers Club does. But Henry does finally suffer a fate. He falls down a well and is never heard from again, I think. I haven't seen part 2, but he's my John Doe for this film.
Well, spoiler alert, Eric. Henry's back in It Chapter 2.
Oh.
But I think it's entirely within reason to give him the award for the character who most deserved to die. He's a reprehensible character. I enjoy your point about Pennywise. Obviously, he's perhaps not entirely dead. Because there is another 2-hour plus installment to come.
And there's the 27 years later aspect to this movie.
Of course.
So,
I mean, if we were giving out an award for the character who most deserved to go into long-term hibernation, sure, give it to Pennywise. But I will say, I find...
That would be the Steve Rogers Award, I believe, named for Chris Evans in Captain America.
Haven't seen it.
Well,
but
that's going to be for our Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast, where I see all the films and then you haven't seen them.
And it's called Isn't That Marvelous? It's a little bit Judy Garland, a little bit Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I will say that I think Pennywise, his sole redeeming characteristic is his great panache. He's a real showman. He's a huckster. He's, I think he's a very stylish, cosmic horror. And I think the inverse of long, lithe, and stylish Pennywise is greasy, dressed in nylon Sonia Kasbrak. I think she's a disgusting, atrocious, awful character. If she were my mother, I'd want to kick her down a drain pipe. I mean, I think that Sonia Kasbrak, Eddie's mother.
Okay, sounds good. So let's move on to our final award, most gratuitous screen moment or scene. We call this the Gaspar Noé Ken Russell Award, named for the filmmakers of films like Irreversible, Climax, Love 3D,
Lair of the White Worm,
Lair of the White Altered States, The Devils. That's, by the way, there was a slash between 2 of those films, so we actually segued from one filmmaker into another. But anyway, they share the award in our minds.
So Eric, what's your most gratuitous screen moment in a film with increasingly baroque and esoteric screen moments?
I think I'm going to disappoint you here. Believe it or not, my most gratuitous scene in this film is the bathroom cleaning montage to the Cure song. As much as I love this, as much as I love the soundtrack of this movie, and yes, any film that features "Dear God" by XTC is okay in my book. That montage is so goofy, and yes, it may represent the team bonding, but we've already seen that. We see it many times. They have many opportunities to bond. There is no need for that montage in this film. What about you?
I'm going to go in a bit of a different direction. And I got to say, I do love that sequence. I love a montage. And, I mean, I think that moment that you are describing as gratuitous actually is one of those kind of simpler, quieter, less driving, relentless horror experiences in this movie that actually gives the audience a chance to sort of breathe and get ready for the next spate of scares. I will tell you.
I think sometimes montages are ways of, they're almost like cinematic shorthand, and they're shortcuts for filmmakers to say things without dialogue, and it's clumsy. It's just clumsy.
Here I feel like it's it's a palate cleanser between courses.
Fair enough.
But I would say, and this is kind of motivated by my understanding of the characters from the novel. When the Losers Club are swimming in the quarry, Ben Hanscom, the overweight, sort of studious engineer of the Losers Club, when he is with the other kids and he's shirtless, and I think that that particular moment of flesh is gratuitous because it is strongly, I wouldn't even say it's implied, it's explicit in the novel that Ben is so sort of ashamed of his body that he would never allow himself to be seen without like a sweatshirt on in the middle of summer. So I found that to be a little gratuitous.
But that's what a human body looks like. So I don't agree with that. Yes, maybe the book says that, but I don't know. I mean, I give that actor props for doing it, and
I do too. I think it's a brave. I think they
were all in their tidy whities. I mean, this is not an easy scene.
Sure.
It must have been mortifying to some extent, but props to all of them for doing it, and
for all of these kids in there. Yeah,
but especially to Ben, to that actor, because I think it's brave. That's all.
It's brave, but it's out of character, and thus I'm defining gratuitous as in that vein.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this podcast, and if you do, give us a damn rating on iTunes. Tell your friends, tell your enemies to subscribe, and be sure to check out additional information on our website, 21jumpscare.com. Our theme music is by Sir Cubworth.
And how can our audience find you online?
Don't look for me. No, actually, you can find me on Letterboxd under my name, also on Twitter.
Thank you, Mr. Winnick, for getting together with me once more to discuss some of my all-time faves. I'm glad that your education is progressing apace, and I am shocked and delighted to all of you who are listening to us here, and we will see you next time at the internet's latest address for horror, 21 Jump Scare.